Well, hello there, good people. Hi, it's Jason with Green Country Agroforestry. It's Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, and it is time for our weekly permaculture podcast or live stream or whatever you want to call it. Well, hello there. Um, let's see, we don't have any in the anybody in the audience just yet. I just wanted to let you know that hey, our website is up. It's still a little bit under construction, but there are some things at the website right now that you can go and peruse. Um, Still working on this, trying to figure out how to do it. It's been a while since I've built a website. I think the last time I did it was somewhere around 1989, 1990. No, it couldn't be. It couldn't have been that long ago. Hi, kitty. I don't know what you want. But today we'll be looking at the website. We'll go ahead and start with a share of that website. Go ahead and add this in. All right, so if you enter in www.greencountryagroforestry.com into your web browser, it will take you to this page here. See, it has that nice, pretty welcome to Green Country Agroforestry up there at the top, and underneath it says Growing the Future. That's your tagline. All across the top, we've got little tabs here, a home, a shop, a blog. I'll be using the blog here in a little bit. Another tab called resources. I'll get to that in a minute. There is a forum that we can communicate back and forth with, even if I don't happen to be online and you want to ask questions of me or other people in the gardening community, that can go right there. We do have membership. Tips is not completed yet. Plants is not completed yet. About is, well, the same thing that is down here, which you can read at your leisure. I'm not going to go into that right now. We do have more, but that's store policies and location, boring stuff there. Let me come back over here to StreamYard. I see we have one person watching right now. Well, hello there. Hi, how you doing? I want to angle this camera down just a little bit to show you what I'm wearing. And let me pull that share up for the moment. That's right. We've got a shirt that says Green Country Agroforestry on it. We've started to make our own shirts. I know, really exciting. This one here, don't have this one available on the store right now. This is a heat transfer. I wanted a shirt with a pocket on it, and so I put this on the front. And I discovered something about heat transfers and things of this size. If you put it on a shirt this size, you can kind of get it centered, but pockets get in the way, which is probably the reason. Hi, kitty. Bye, kitty. This is probably the reason why most of the t-shirts that you see that people are advertising don't have pockets on them. But hey, yeah, you live, you learn. I guess you could always put this design on the back, or at some point, I'm going to order up some shirts from Carhartt, and we'll press a few decent quality work shirts with the logo on them. We'll just call that the uniform. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the stream. Here we go. So we've got our website up. Of course, you can click on shop to shop with us. Right now, we don't have plants up for sale, but we do have some merchandise. We got a little chat section for members down here. Examples: we've got a mug. Hey, look at this mug with the logo on it. Those are $13. Shipping and handling, all that good stuff. Let's see, what else do we have in here? We have, of course, a t-shirt with a nice, pretty model wearing it. There's Growing the Future for the little tagline there. You can get it in a variety of different colors, like so. All right, but that's not what we're here for. We're here for the Tao of Woodland Gardening. And this is something that I put into a blog post a couple of days ago. I was doing my show notes, and it occurred to me, I should probably just go ahead and write my show notes out in the form of a blog post. And there it is. Hi, Gail. How are you doing tonight? It's good to see you in here. I've got another thing that I want to inform people of. I'm going to wait until there's a few more people in before I start talking about next week's show. But there is something that you can download and print off for next week's show. So I'll show you here in a little bit. All right. We don't really need to read over this first part here. I was just talking about rambling at 5 in the morning, not knowing what I'm going to say. when it came time for the show to start. So I already knew what the topic was going to be. I knew we needed to discuss some things about some design details, swales, keyline design, mounds, things like that. These are all details. Um, if you're going to be doing a permaculture design, you want to design from the overall general design to specific details. So you start with well, what is it you're trying to build? Um, Individual details may not be important on any given site. So general principle first. By way of a disclaimer, I have never attended a permaculture design lecture. I've not purchased a piece of paper from the people who sell pieces of paper in order to convince anyone else that I know anything at all about permaculture. In all fairness, none of the certified teachers of permaculture has ever come to me seeking a piece of paper with my approval for them to teach whatever it is that they teach, and it hasn't seemed to harm their credibility either. All right. I grew up on one of the many farms where the solutions to soil erosion and water management were first developed. That was Conrad Farms. That was here in northeastern Oklahoma. Around 1934, my grandfather Carol Conrad and his brother Chester came down from Kansas. This was at the height of the Dust Bowl, and they were interested in starting up a farm here in northeastern Oklahoma. They were attempting to find ways to prevent what was going on in other parts of the Great Plains area from happening, especially not to them. Land prices were cheap because people were going out of business. So they set about trying to find ways to start up a farm where they could produce agricultural products and not lose their soil, which was what was happening at the time. So beginning in 1934, they started up with the earthworks and established tree belts. Grandfather used an old farm oil tractor and a box blade and started moving dirt around. He wasn't doing this blindly. There were a lot of other people that were involved trying to come up with solutions at the same time. You may have heard of one of them. His name was P.A. Yeomans, Percival Alfred Yeomans. He was over in Australia. Same time, 1934, he started working on his new farm, also with similar problems. How do we control soil erosion? How do we capture and hold on to water? How do we make this thing work? And so he and my grandfather were engaged in a letter writing campaign back and forth for several years. And they weren't the only ones, obviously. There were quite a few more that were involved in this process. Grandpa farmed that farm for about 20 years or so before he retired. And we moved back to the farm. My family did, my mother and I, and my two older brothers moved back to the farm in 1977. All the changes that Granddad had done were still plainly visible. You could walk down from the three irrigation ponds that stepped one into the other, that had at the upper level, we had a fairly shallow system that had a lot of feeder fish in it, minnows, essentially shad, things like that. And then down below that, there was a broad swampy area that was planted up in cottonwoods, and cottonwoods love water. One interesting thing about the eastern cottonwood is the foliage of the eastern cottonwood is just full of protein. So you could use this as a browse for livestock if you wanted to. But what Granddad was using it for was just to allow those leaves to fall into the swampy area, that marshland area, and enrich the soil. So as it overflowed into the next pond down, it carried along that fertility with it. Of course, this was a great place for amphibians, frogs, and other things to get into. The minnows, whenever they overflowed from the upper pond, would come into there, and then eventually into the lower pond, which was about an acre and a half of surface area, very deep, about 40 feet deep, I think, altogether. So it held a lot of water, and he used that to irrigate the other 77 acres. Well, not counting where the house was, which was about another acre and a half or so. Spread that water out across the landscape. Now, down from where the ponds were, you came to a flat level area. I guess if I was to use my finger and point it up, this is north. We had two branches of Hakey Creek running on either side of the property. The property kind of looks like this, but this is the low area. The house is right around here, around where my knuckle is, and the ponds were up right around here. So whenever water came from the watershed from the north and started flowing in, they would collect in these ponds. Whenever they filled up and started overflowing, then they would come down and spread out across the rest of the landscape. Now in the lowland areas, in between areas where the crops were planted, Granddad dug trenches all the way around. Everywhere there was going to be a place where crops were going to be grown. He was growing annuals. Now, at the edges of those trenches, he would plant tree belts so that whenever he created a trench, a ditch that was going to collect and hold water and store water and let that sink back down into the landscape, the tree belts would hold that ground, and that went all the way out to the creeks on either side. He made sure those edges of the creeks were planted up because they will erode away quickly if you don't. All of this stuff was plainly visible by the time we got back there in '77. I got to walk around and see what he had done. Um, Now, this is kind of interesting. My grandmother had built a small perennial garden next to the barn where the equipment was stored. And that's also where the produce was washed and prepared to either be sold out of the front of the barn, which they did at one time, or it could be loaded up into trucks and then taken into the markets in town, into Tulsa. A few years later, Chester broke off and set up his own produce shop in Bixby. That one ran until just a few years ago. And Chester worked as not only as a farmer but as an aggregator as well. And Grandpa retired well before that. Anyway, grandmother had set up this little garden area, perennial garden next to that barn, and it faced east. It had 3 large pools, which each held goldfish and aquatic plants. I didn't think about this until much, much later, but in a way, it was kind of a reflection of the main system of capturing the water in 3 ponds, step down, dun, 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 and then the overflow is allowed to come out to the fields. All right. So there were lateral impressions coming off of each of those ponds. So whenever they overflowed, it would spread the water out across the entire garden. Everywhere around, there were hyacinth, violet, irises, and daylilies. Nothing was fertilized, nothing was watered, nothing was weeded, and the fish were never fed. And it was like that for decades, at least 20 years that I know of. That little ecosystem just sustained itself. Well, it turns out Grandpa wasn't the genius permaculture designer of the family. Grandma was. And she taught me as much as I was willing to learn at the time. My younger self was more interested in going fishing than hanging around for plant propagation lessons, for example. And that is a shame because Grandma could get anything to root. But we did take a lot of walks in the woods, and she'd show me what was going on with nature, and satisfied my young mind quite a bit in that way. Hey, before we get too much further in, let me take a look and see what's going on with comments. Wow, we got a lot of people in here. Of course, there's Hickory Croft Farm. Hi, Flavors and Textures. How you doing? Arkansas Woodcutter. Hello, Mark. Welcome to the revolution. Hello. Yeah, I saw you did some work. We're doing some work with some persimmons out there today. That's some good eating. Don't eat too many at once. It'll stop you up. Chicken Johnny. Hi there. How you doing? And who else is in here? Is that it? Is that it? Cindy's Place and Donna J. Griggs. Hi, how you doing? Yeah, Eastern Cottonwood is an excellent pioneering species. They love it wet. Incidentally, if you're going onto a site, and I'll probably get into this here a little bit more in a minute, but if you're going onto a site and you're having that first look around and you're wondering where your water is, there's a few species of tree that you can look for that will tell you, even if you can't see the water at the surface. If you see Eastern Cottonwood, there's water not far down. If you see alder trees, there's water not far down. Any kind of poplar also like to be close to water. Willows, another good indicator of where there's water at. So you follow those trees around, you see where they're highest concentrated, and if there's not surface water, it's just a few feet below. You can dig a well there and hit water. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars trying to find a dry well. You can find water close to the surface. Hello, Carl. How you doing? Let's see where I thought I said. Yeah, there you are. Dehydrating slices of persimmon. I saw somebody had left a comment about that, dehydrating the persimmons. And I've never had dehydrated persimmon. I've always had it fresh. Unfortunately, I've never bitten into one that wasn't completely ripe. But I've been warned, and yeah, it could be bad. So I found some pictures from Pixabay. That's a photo sharing site that Lori's World turned me on to. The ponds were actually not exactly like this. There would be some cattails in there as well. And of course, you can see the goldfish in between the lily pads. All right. So Conrad Homestead was asking last week about swales and key lines and mounds and things like those. And those are earthworks design features and part of water management. I do know quite a bit about it growing up where I did. Matter of fact, I used to to sit out on the warmer days whenever it was raining back behind the barn, and I would play around in the mud back there, and I would go ahead and create little earthworks and study how the water was moving through that landscape and working out what was going on. And the reason I was doing that was not because I was that interested in agriculture at the time. What I was interested in was fishing. And I had gotten it into my head that if I could study the way rivers worked and the way bodies of water were created, I could have an idea or understanding what was going on beneath the surface whenever I looked at one. And that would increase my chances of catching fish whenever we went out to go fishing. I was always thinking about fishing. So that's really the reason why I was studying the flow of water on the landscape. It just happens to turn out that there's also that application for irrigating your crops as well. Nearly 9 years ago, my daughter came to live with me. It was part of the agreement her mother and I had. She would spend her childhood years with her mom, and I would take over to guide her from being a teenager to being a responsible adult. Well, hopefully a responsible adult. Her mom didn't believe that was going to happen, but she turned 13, and her mom realized, oh, crud, I've got a teenager in my hand, and I have no idea what I'm going to do with her. So she came over and said, remember what we talked about? And said, yeah, I do remember. So here she is. So this involved a lot of training on independence, and one of the most important aspects of being independent is knowing how to protect oneself. So in addition to learning to wash her own clothes and dishes and make her own meals, sometimes she'd make them for me too, which was very nice. But taught her how to pursue her continuing education in the fields of study that interested her. So taught her how to read. Well, she already knew how to read, but I really encouraged her to just dive in whenever she found a topic that she was interested in to, go for it. Find out everything you could. Because at the end of the day, all of your education is self-education. If you don't have the internal motivation to do it, it doesn't matter if somebody's talking at you. It'll go in one ear and out the other. But I began teaching her some martial arts. She eventually started to take lessons from my own sensei's principal student. But to get her started, I outlined 5 principles for her. And I feel that these have some relationship with permaculture design. So today we're going to have a basic introduction course to Qigong, which is not a martial art. It's not a combat martial art at all. Not even really a martial art properly, but it's a means of understanding the flow of energy through a dynamic system. And it has many applications. If you're going to wind up going into some sort of martial art, if you have some background in Qigong and understand energy flow, you're going to be well ahead of everybody else in the class. So in short, the form has 5 principles. Those are breathing, balance, observation, choice, and conservation. Breathing, balance, observation, choice, and conservation. There's Conrad Homestead. Hi, how you doing? And grow something with Jeff. All right, Conrad, it's Paul, right? This today's session is inspired by you. So so welcome. Now, although I listed observation as the 3rd principle, is actually the one that we are going to start with and return to over and over and over again. For self-defense purposes, it's important to develop the skill of instantly observing as much as possible when you enter into a new situation. Where are the potential exits? What are the potential threats? Who or what might be a powerful ally or potential ally? What could be used as a weapon, either for you or against you? The analog for permaculture design is making your initial observations when coming onto a new site. So you're going to ask questions like, what's the climate like? You're not going to be able to do a whole lot about what the overall climate is. You may be able to find ways that you can manipulate microclimates. That's something else entirely. But the overall climate is not something that you can change. It's not something you can change as an individual. It's not something that 7.2 billion people on planet Earth can change if we were really trying to. How much annual rainfall is there? Oh, you can mess up the local environment, absolutely. If you gather a bunch of people into a small area, you can definitely mess up the local environment. But the overall climate, you're not really able to affect much. All right, so how much annual rainfall do you get? When does it fall? How well does it infiltrate into the soil whenever it does fall? You could have lots of rainfall, but if it's not penetrating into the soil very far and is just running off, you don't get the benefit of having that water. You could take your water hose and spray it on the yard and go, okay, well, the surface looks wet, but most of your water's moved on off of the property and it didn't get down there into the dirt. What are the first and last frost dates? Very important. That's, of course, growing zone information will tell you that. Average temperatures can be expected from month to month. That's something that should be available as a resource. You can consult the nearest news publication for monthly high and low temperatures. They should have that. What type or types of soil are present, and what kind of native plant and animal species are around that you can look to for clues or indicators about how you might want to shape the site for your own purposes, because nature is going to be your very best instructor. Furthermore, what resources does the site have to offer? So observation first before anything else. Now, this is kind of interesting. As I mentioned before, I never took a permaculture design course. Didn't get a diploma or a certificate from somebody that's teaching permaculture design. As a matter of fact, I've never read the permaculture manual that Bill Mollison wrote. And if I wind up saying some things that sound mighty similar, and I've been told that I do wind up saying some things that are mighty similar, it might have something to do with the fact that these are pretty good, basic, and common sense ideas. And if two or more people wind up coming up with similar ideas, then there might be some truth to it. Observations important. Okay, hi Paul. Observations are important for everything. Yeah, absolutely. Uh, Big difference in the growing zone and growing climate. Absolutely. Um, yeah, I do have a military background, so some of that is influenced by that. And you're observing the observation parallels. Yeah, there are a lot of parallels going back and forth across. It's really weird. Martial arts can be used as a template for a whole bunch of other things. If you've been watching, what is that, Cobra Kai? They're equating martial arts practice to other aspects of life. And I thought that was kind of funny. All right. So there was a time that I worked in the corporate world as a troubleshooter, mainly for restaurant chains, large restaurant chains. I have several different ones. I won't go into all of them. But as a troubleshooter, I would come into a business and I'd spend the first week or two observing how it operated. I'd take my inventory, I'd identify places where the culture of the business might be deficient. You'd be surprised to discover that in most of the cases, most cases, where an operation is not returning profits as expected, the bulk of the problems stem from poor inventory controls. In short, if you don't know what resources one has, if you don't know what you have, it's impossible to utilize those resources efficiently. That goes for human resources as well as material resources. And it relates to permaculture design as well. Whenever you've got a person, plant, or animal fulfilling the role that they're best suited for, they prosper. They require less hands-on management, and your overall system prospers. You can have a person that's not really a good people person, but would be very comfortable in the back of the house flipping burgers, for example, at a burger joint, or working the grill at a seafood restaurant. We've had those situations before. Some people are better at doing food prep. They can't handle that constant stress of orders coming flying at them, but they can be quiet and contemplative and be doing work in other areas, and they're very happy doing that. When you have happy employees or happy animals or happy plants, the entire system benefits from that. Well, yeah, there's the complication of who wrote the book, and there's also problems that have come about with the way it's being used and interpreted. There are a lot of people out there. I'll get into this more in a minute. But there are a lot of people out there that have ideas about what permaculture is or what it's supposed to be, and they've got this idea stuck in their head. And I don't want to get an idea stuck in my head that prevents me from being able to think clearly and plan and do the work that I'm trying to accomplish effectively. If I get locked into a rut of thinking I know what this is that I'm working on, I don't engage my mind. I don't think about it. And if I don't think about it, then I'm not using one of my resources, what I have up here, to its full ability. So in some ways, there are things I don't want to know. I don't want to read the manual. Odd as that might seem. Okay, we're going to start out with something simple, and this is the principle of breathing. After observation was what? Breathing, balance, observation again. Okay, so we'll go into breathing. All interactions involve the exchange of energy. You can think about this. Whenever you go up and you have an interaction at a restaurant, at a store, meeting someone, there's an energy exchange that takes place. You're either transferring energy from one entity to another, or changing energy from potential to kinetic energy to potential energy. Everywhere you look, if something's happening, you're seeing energy in motion. You don't have to do this if you don't want to, but just if you want to follow along with the exercise, go ahead and take a deep breath and then exhale. All right, what just happened? Well, you've taken oxygen in the atmosphere and you've bonded it with the hemoglobin in your bloodstream. Exchange that oxygen for some of the carbon dioxide that your cells produce, as they utilized previously inhaled oxygen to convert sugars into energy. On the other side of this exchange, there's a plant that's taking in that carbon dioxide, not that carbon dioxide right this second, but carbon dioxide that has been exhaled, using water and energy derived from sunlight or another light source. In this case, I have grow lights over here, to create starches and sugars. And ultimately, the source of the sugars that you need to produce energy are coming from photosynthesis from the sun, facilitated with that carbon dioxide that was in the atmosphere. Energy is being captured, converted, and exchanged. And the unit unit of currency for this exchange is carbon. All life on planet Earth, all life that we know of, really, because we don't really know of any life beyond planet Earth, is dependent upon this constant cycling of carbon. The more carbon that's present is being cycled, the more diversity and quantity of life there is. The less carbon cycling, the less life there is. You know, there are places on Earth that there's very little carbon cycling going on. Can you guess which ones those are without reading? Yeah, deserts. That's right. Very, very little carbon cycling going on in deserts out there. Hello, Ticker's wife, Patty. Deserts have very little carbon cycling. Take a look. Well, this is what happens whenever you don't have that carbon cycling in the system. The energy isn't able to be exchanged between different entities. There's no currency exchanging, no life happening, or very minimal life. There's a misconception making the rounds today that growing trees and other perennials will somehow sequester carbon. This is not exactly true. They're thinking we grow trees, we grow these perennial vegetables, and we do tillage, or we reintroduce them back in and as organic matter to the soil, that it's going to lock the carbon up. And it's not entirely accurate. See, by growing perennials and building soil organic matter, we are cycling carbon. We're adding to the diversity, quantity, and quality of life. But the only true carbon sequestration I'm aware of is when carbon atoms are organized into tight crystalline forms that are difficult or impossible to then decompose through any normal means. Diamonds, for an example, are sequestered carbon. All right. Now apply observation to the breadth of the site that you're working with. This is where we go back to observation and breathing. How does energy move through this site, through the landscape? What are the problems with cycling of carbon in the system? What elements of design do you think you could use to improve or enhance the movement of energy? We're not just talking about solar energy, but also water as well. How are we going about making sure that there's an energetic exchange taking place, moving from one tier to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, keeping that energy involved and working on the property that you're working with? Hi, Mary. Yep, solar radiation. Hello, Darren, down under farm in Forge. Hi, how are you doing? Hi, Doc. How you doing? What are you doing over here? You've already been outside. You've been fed. You've been watered. You want to come over and hang out? We got a dog wants to come hang out for a little bit. Okay. All right. No, dog. No, it's not your time. Okay. Let me see here. Gong exercise. How does energy move through the landscape? Well, that's part of your observation process. You want to take a look and observe and see what's going on. See how the water flows. This is energy moving. See how it's taken up in the plants and the animals and transferred from one to the other. That's part of the observation process, is observing the energy flow. Kick the cat. Cat isn't bothering me. All right. So let's start out with a very, very basic Qigong exercise. Very basic. We'll do the first one sitting down. We'll stand up later on for the rest of it. All right, so taking a deep breath and then exhaling. If you take a deep breath, count to 5 and let it out, in through the nose, out through the mouth. All right. Seems really, really basic. It's like, why would I need to learn how to breathe? This is one of the first things I worked on teaching my daughters, proper breathing. This is the way we usually breathe, right? We come in, we fill our lungs up with air, and then we exhale. It seems straightforward, but did you know that just breathing in the normal way is not as efficient? There's another way you can breathe. There is. All right, so don't do it yet, but let me describe what we're going to do next. Take the breath in normally, the way you ordinarily would, but in through the nose, out through the mouth. But whenever you breathe in as much as you can, you've got your lungs filled up as much as you can, push your lower abdomen out and down. Push your lower abdomen out and down. And then you should discover that you can breathe a little bit more in. So you have a more full and complete breath. Go ahead and try this out. And even sitting down, you should be able to breathe in, fill your lungs up, push your abdomen down and out, and be able to pull in just a little bit more air, just a little bit more air than you thought you could. Simply by making an alteration in the geography of your body, you allow for a greater capacity for energetic flow. All right, let me catch up with comments here. How much external inputs are needed to replenish, or how large or small a piece of property will replenish the taking from the system? Well, that's one of the things that observation is going to tell you. You may not have a good idea about what all resources you have available whenever you first walk onto the site. You have to observe. You have to watch to see what's going on. Um, Down under forage, animals are a major method of movement of vegetative energy. This is true. Now, keep in mind, animals don't necessarily have to be the four-legged variety or even the two-legged variety. There are animals that you cannot even see with the naked eye that are busy transforming vegetative energy. That's soil microbes. As a matter of fact, the very first biosphere project, whenever they got started, this was the project that they launched to study the idea of taking an enclosed environment, say in a spaceship traveling from Earth to another star system, how they could have a closed environment and the people could live in that closed environment and have their sustenance created inside the biosphere. They didn't take into account some of the soil bacteria that were also processing oxygen, moving energy, and their calculations wound up being off, and they had to terminate the project. They wanted to have it as a completely enclosed system. All right, so yeah, there's also fungus and other decomposers. Down under farms says it'll choke on your smoke. Yeah, don't attempt breathing exercises while smoking. It's not advisable. Not advisable at all. Um, Hello, Homer, microfarmer. Thank you, Robert. Thank you. As a matter of fact, hey, Homer, I got something from you earlier today. Look at this. Microfarmer, there's your address there. What could be in this envelope I got from Microfarmer? We got a little mail card going on. Ah, look at this Visa gift card. Hey, thank you, thank you. I won this in a contest where the question asked was what was Mark's original profession, or what was his profession whenever we first met him. And of course, I happen to know that he was a teacher. So this is a $25 gift card. Thank you very much. I've got a good use for this, actually. All right. So first breathing exercise, we learned that we have more room for air in our lungs than just by the normal breathing in, filling the upper chest cavity. You can lower the abdomen and pull in extra air. Now, this is important because whenever you do this, you'll notice where it feels like that air is moving. It feels like it's moving down down to a little past your navel, a little bit past your belly button. As a matter of fact, the point we're talking about is about 2 fingers below your belly button to about the width of the hand below the belly button. Now, in Qigong, this is called the Dantian. It's the energetic circle, or energetic center is also the center of gravity, which brings us around to the second principle, which was balance. Mark was not a go-go dancer. I know, right? So balance is our next thing. And of course, I got this nice little picture of a person balancing. Looks like they're making a little tree. We're going to do this here in a little bit. Not exactly like this, though. All right, so somewhere beneath your navel. I already talked about that. The center of gravity tends to be lower for women than it does for men. That's just the way our bodies differ in architecture. If you move your body about, but you don't move your center of gravity, you notice that there are limits to how far you can reach or bend. If you go too far, you have to move the center of gravity or you become unbalanced and you're going to fall over. Now, successful employing techniques in judo, jiu-jitsu, aikido, and goju-ryu all depend upon a keen awareness of one's center of gravity, which is one of the reasons why these basic principles I was laying out are still applicable no matter what specific martial art form you decide you're going to take up. Now, you combine breathing with balance. You breathe in deeply, extend the lower abdomen. Find this even easier to draw in more air. More air equates to more complete oxygenation of the bloodstream, more complete exchange of carbon, and you'll also become more and more consciously aware of your center of gravity. Going back to nature, nature is always constantly working to achieve a balance of her own. You get too much of any one thing in a system, and you'll inevitably wind up with problems. Pests are attracted to large amounts of the same plant, for example. Diseases spread easily to neighboring plants of the same genus. Too many of the same type of plant might even lead to depletion of one or more essential nutrients, leaving them open for even more misfortune. Now, a lot of the diseases that you have come about because of lack of proper nutrition for your plants. Compaction in the soils, mineral deficiencies are all invitation to the weeds, which are really there simply to help correct these problems. Nature is trying to achieve a balance. I have a cousin that works about 100 head of beef cattle. And every year, I try to talk him out of doing this, but every year he goes out and he sprays for Canadian thistle and pigweed. Canadian thistle and pigweed. Has to spray, has to get rid of the Canadian thistle and pigweed. And then every year he has to go out and he has to fertilize the soil, and he occasionally has to even work the soil whenever he goes, and then re-sows so that the cows have fodder to graze on. I said, "You know what you're doing, right?" He says, "Yeah, I'm stopping the Canadian thistle and the pigweed." So no, what you're doing is you're stopping nature from correcting the problems that require that you go out there and do all that extra work in the first place. If you left that Canadian thistle and pigweed alone and moved the cattle on to another pasture, within a season or two, the Canadian thistle and pigweed are going to take care of the problems, which was compaction of the soil, which is Canadian thistle, and lack of phosphorus, which is the pigweed. Once they grow, complete their life cycle, die, fall back down on the surface, they restore the nutrient balance in the upper layer. They're not needed anymore. They go away. Yeah, you'll have a little bit here and there, but it won't be a field full of Canadian thistle. And it won't be a field full of pigweed. But you still sprays. All right. So if a resource is going to be taken out of a system, this is also balanced. It needs to be added back in. So either by your own conscious design choice, whenever you're designing your dynamic system, what elements are you going to put in and how are they going to play with each other? You either take into account how you're going to put your resources back, or nature's going to do it for you. And she's going to be indifferent to what it is that you want. She's going to do it. She'll balance the equation. So balance in a permaculture system is also important architecturally. So just as the Dantian is the energetic center of your body, all dynamic systems do have an energetic center of their own. That's the point where all the energy flows into or flows out from. Once again, you're going to be observing, you're going to be watching how energy flows through the landscape when you're looking at a new site. What the center looks like in your application is going to depend upon a number of factors. I couldn't tell you unless I was looking at it. And my idea of what the energetic center is or should be may be different from yours after you study it for a while. Once again, a lot of this is variable and it can be changed by how you go about approaching your design. You could have a large water catchment that supplies numerous other irrigation features as the energetic center. It might be the position of your home or the place for a small farm or a homestead, or it could be the staging area for workers to gather whenever they're harvesting from the site. If you have a site that doesn't actually consist of a homestead, it's actually just one aspect of a larger farming operation. It could be the place where everybody comes and gathers whenever they're preparing to go out to the various features on site to do the harvest or do the work. It may not necessarily be the physical center of the site, but keep in mind that the more disconnected from the energetic center, the more difficult it will be for an individual element to remain in balance. Just like whenever you're leaning over, trying to reach this bottle over here, I have to struggle harder to avoid losing my balance to pick this bottle up and bring it over because it's farther and farther away from the energetic center. Now I can always move my center closer to where I'm going to do the work, or I have to struggle against the entropy and falling over. Same thing happens whenever you're designing a permaculture site, or well, any site really. All right, before we get into combining breathing with balance, let me take a look and see what's going on in comments, questions, complaints. All right. You guys are carrying on here. See somebody talking, Paul's talking about biosphere 2. I really liked the biosphere 2, but it's not what the biosphere 1 promised to be. So I think that's an experiment that we need to go back and do the experiment again. Only now we have more information to work with and we can maybe plan a little bit better. Okay, so down under, Darren says, generally only small amounts of micronutrients move through the fungal channels. Generally, they'll stay on the site. Okay. Hey, you can get real sushi. I can always get real sushi. All right. Hi, Jan. All right. Let me see here. Okay, largest problem with Biosphere 2 experiment was the human factor. They couldn't get along and coexist. Yeah, that's a huge problem for the larger biosphere experiment that's going on right now. The one we call Planet Earth is we're having a hard time getting along and coexisting, and a lot of that has to do with our idea of what can and can't be controlled. I'm going to address that really quick. If I told you to raise your right hand, I don't know how many of you people are actually raising your right hand right now, but if you are, did I make you raise your right hand, or did you choose to raise your right hand? If I were to point a gun at you and tell you to raise your right hand, and you raised your right hand, you might be doing it because you don't want me to hurt you. But ultimately, it is a choice that you are making, whether you're going to engage in that behavior or not. It's everything that you do. It's a choice on your own part, what behavior you're going to engage in. And people are, to a large extent, not accepting of the fact that they are absolutely 100% in control of whatever it is that they do at all times. It's so easy to push it off on somebody else. Well, we expect somebody else to do this. Somebody else is going to tell us what to do. Somebody else is going to tell us how to behave. We know how to behave, and we can if we take personal responsibility. And that's very important for coexisting, I think. We don't need somebody threatening violence against us to make us behave properly. Humans in a bubble, what can go wrong? Yeah, mind and body wellness. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and proceed on with the key Gong exercise here in a moment. Cindy's place has to go. Let's see, migratory birds with the ultimate movers and nutrients. Migratory birds, yes. Migratory fish as well. Think about the ecosystems where the salmon would take and start up there in the streams where they spawn. They go down to the ocean. They run around in the ocean collecting phosphorus, right? Because all the phosphorus leaves the terrestrial landscape, goes out into the oceans. The fish collect it. They come back up. What happens? Oh, the bears come along, scoop up the fish, getting all that phosphorus. The bear's done. They put the phosphorus right back on the surface. The bears are serving a purpose in the ecosystem. harvesting nutrients from the sea and putting them back on land is something that that we can definitely do more of. Or you can let the bears do it, but you might not want to have that many bears working. Okay. Migratory herbivores being the greatest movers of nutrients. Of course, migratory herbivores were incredibly important for maintaining a grasslands ecosystem. Whenever we got rid of the bison, for example, that was the death knell for the the tall grass prairie. It was on its way out. The only thing that we did after that made things worse was come in and start ripping up the ground with plows and going, wow, this is great soil for planting wheat and barley and corn into. The only way you maintain a grasslands ecosystem for long periods of time is with large mobs of migratory ruminants, and we don't have that. So we have to either take the place of the migratory ruminants, or we have to accept that we are not going to be able to have a grasslands ecosystem and start planting trees instead. Spraying is easier at the moment. Yeah, I mean, I don't have any problem with Lori's World linking the Shed Wars profile to this. Matter of fact, last week's she had linked as well. Nettles, yeah. Hi, Lynn. Hi, Wayne. Okay, so bears, wolves take the salmon further. Oh, do they now? Isn't that interesting? So nature has its own system of taking and recycling those nutrients and bringing them back to the terrestrial landscape. All right, so where were we here? Combining breathing with balance. It's going to require that I stand up, I think. Before we get to that, consider how work is going to be accomplished on the site. How will energy flow through the site, and how will work be done? How are you going to maintain that balance? How do you make it so that you aren't exerting too much effort trying to be over here doing this thing whenever your energetic center is here? For small sites like a home garden, it may be just fine to have narrow paths and closely spaced plantings. A lot of production can be backed into a small space. But for larger projects where you are going to need machinery to move around, your pathways are going to need to be designed that can accommodate the machinery. If that machinery is going to be stored and maintained on site, you're going to need infrastructure to store it. I've got a little picture coming up here that is kind of interesting. This is unfortunately not from the University of Michigan. I don't know exactly where this is from, but you see you've got this man walking along the sidewalk here. The sidewalk connects to the street over there. There's some buildings, probably some things happening. There's, I think, a bicycle or something off over here. This is a little green space, right? But you can see what's happening here. There's a dirt track. People are walking through, and they're not going down the sidewalk and around this way. No, they're taking the shortest path. They're going straight across, right? This is the most energy efficient way for them to travel across the space. So they take this track instead. But the designers, they put the walkway here. All right. So this brings us back to observation again as we see how energy, water, and various other elements move through the system and interact with each other. The paths that animals and humans take to interact with the elements of the site will suggest the ideal places to lay paths. I can't talk. Planners at the University of Michigan, for example, chose not to lay sidewalks. Instead, they let the students and the faculty establish the routes that they were preferring to take when traveling about the campus. It's a more efficient use of resources. Design the pathways and then attempt to fit, or which is a more efficient use of resources. Design the pathways and then try to fit the elements into the pattern, or permit the natural flow of energy through the site and inform you where major elements should be. And then design the paths afterwards. So I had a similar problem out here in the front yard garden. I had this idea in my head about what I wanted. And then after I'd already gone to the effort of putting a path down, this is a gravel walkway, I realized I don't want to go with this design at all. I want to do something entirely different. But of course, now I have to take up that gravel and move it to somewhere else because it's in the way. I've just created extra work for myself. So this was a failure to properly observe, and failure to properly observe how energy was flowing through the system. In this particular case, the energy of people moving through the system. I didn't observe that, and I went ahead with a design element that was completely out of place. So, hey, yeah, mistakes. Another example of designing from the general to the specific might be placing elements that will require a lot of daily attention along those pathways. So you know you're going to be walking up to where that irrigation pond is every day, right? Well, why don't you, just as a thought, along that pathway, plant some daylilies or asparagus and strawberries. Those all along that pathway. You have to go and harvest those daily. You're going to be going by and harvesting those daily. Well, you may as well put that into that system where you're going to be walking anyway. All right. Are the nettles beneficial? I think so. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Before we geotransform Mars, let's terraform Australia's desert, and it's absolutely doable. It's doable. Probably not in our lifetimes, but eventually we can get there. The Earth is a really, really big place. And yeah, people, nutrients, animals all take the path of least resistance. As a matter of fact, I did say the Tao of woodland gardening. One of the principles of Taoism is studying that flow of energy. Water seeks the lowest place. It flows from the mountains down to the valleys. The way exists before the substance follows. If you're aware of the way, then you know what's going to happen. You can see what happens. You can see what's going to happen. Jeff has to leave. Thank you, Jeff. All right, with large-scale agrofarming, doesn't fit the environment like large Chinese megacore taking the inputs from the system that would be hard to reestablish. Oh yeah, yeah. When you pull something out and you don't provide to put it back, you create imbalances. Imbalances nature will attempt to correct. You may not like the results. Hey, there's Sassafras Red. Hi, how you doing? Haven't seen you since I think Greg's live stream. So this is why Mark is laying down general pathways and then setting layer edges with trees and then planting the holes. Yeah, fill in details after the general design has been established. You want to establish your general design. Start out with knowing where that energetic center is, where you're going to be traveling to and from most of the time. That way you can make the actual distance that you're traveling, the amount of work that you're doing, less. Make it easier for yourself. You don't have to work harder than you absolutely have to. And then add in details, but start with the general, work to the specifics. Okay. Scary part of the profit in big ag is so short-sighted. Yeah. You get a little bit of short-term profit, but the long-term cost is not worth it. It's not worth it at all. You take a look at oh boy, I'm gonna talk about whale farming. You take a look at the whaling industry. The people that are relying upon whales for meat and are out there hunting whales would serve themselves well by not killing too many whales. Harvest enough to meet the needs, but without harvesting so many that they have a diminishing return the next year and the next and the next. Idle-year-old diesel and plant a tree. Yeah. But we have to start working on developing a different mindset. Be more responsible with the way we interact with each other, and of course with the world around us. And if we do this, we discover that the overall efficiency of a well-balanced system is so productive that we're going to get our profit. We're absolutely going to get our profit out of it. Okay, so a permaculture system will be self-sustaining with excess returned back into the energy flow of the system, but it's rarely a completely closed system. The Biosphere project, of course, is an example of an attempt at a closed system, an actual completely closed system. In the real world, it's not a completely closed system. You're getting inputs coming from outside of the system passively all the time. Those include your rainfall, the water from an upslope watershed flowing down onto the property, your sunlight, atmospheric carbon. All of these things are coming in from outside of the site. And when your resources are properly balanced, the surpluses can be output in the form of food, fiber, medicine, timber. And you can do this without threatening the integrity of the system itself, because those inputs are already coming in from outside. You might think, well, what about the minerals in the soil? Won't those be depleted? This goes back in again to your fundamental design, the elements that you're adding. Are you putting in bioaccumulators for those nutrients? Are you putting in plants that send those roots down deep below the soil, down into the water table where soluble minerals are present, pumping those up from deep below the soil, bringing them up and putting them on the surface where they can be utilized by everything else? Even solid, hard rock is being mined for its minerals by various elements in a natural design. So all of this stuff comes back. Of course, sometimes it requires a bear or a wolf dragging a salmon from the river and dropping it up there. All right, now sometimes potentially marketable products emerge as a happy byproduct of other functions. For example, right here, on this third acre, we have Alnus glutinosa, which is European alder, as a biomass generator. It's also a bridge species between fruiting perennials and nut-bearing perennials. More on that next week. I'll be going into mycorrhizal mutual networks next week. We also have Galanthus, which is wintergreen. It hasn't arrived yet. We have it coming here. It'll be here before March, which is serving as a ground cover and also a companion for our blueberry bushes. Once again, Galanthus is one of those bridge species. It connects the ericaceous plants with the ectomycorrhizal plants. So we can form mutual networks between the pecan and the hazelnut trees and the blueberries. All right. So we combine oil of wintergreen and a powdered extract from the bark of the alder tree, and we have a 100% organically grown, 100% renewable toothpaste as a byproduct. Forestry products, stacking functions, and the blueberries are growing in the shade. Yeah, exits from the tips. The fungi themselves are exceptionally powerful at breaking down minerals from even solid rock, and they do that. They mine the minerals from the rock. They mine them from the sand. They mine them from everything, bring them to the plants, and there's an exchange going on below the surface that we don't even see. But we're now beginning to become aware of all the wonderful things that are happening beneath the surface with those unassuming little fungi doing the hard work for us. I think watching Mark's project grow is going to be quite interesting. He's got soil that's not too much different from our own here. It's also Arkansas river bottom, and not too far removed in growing zone too. Too little space for everything I want to grow. I know exactly what you mean. Mark was putting his persimmons in today. I was like, wow, I would love to have some, but I don't know where I'd put them. I've got another 10 full-size trees coming in. We're putting on this third acre. We already have so many. Another 10 trees coming in, and I lost track of how many little woody perennials are going in this year. Quite a few. And at the moment, I probably will have a space to put something like persimmon. I just don't know where yet. Now, a lot of people are designing their food forests, and they're packing the trees in and going, "Oh, it's okay. You can pack them in. You can put them in." And they crowd their trees. I suppose you could do this to a certain extent, especially if they're establishing mutual networks and you can get away with some of it. But think about long term. Whenever the trees try to get as big as they're going to get, you're going to have to constantly work at keeping those trees pruned. And that's okay for some things. My pear trees, for example, I'm planning on keeping those pruned to about 12 to 14 foot or so. And that's perfectly fine. It makes it easier to harvest the fruit. But to have to do that with everything in your system means you're going to have to do a lot of extra work. So it might be beneficial to think about how big everything is going to be whenever it gets really big. Mark, I'm going to get into a lot about that question that you had. What other than wintergreen does that next week? But I believe heather grass is one example of another thing that can connect different systems together. Let's see. All right, hard part right now would be very hard to move to a no input system quickly. Well, yeah, you can't just go, all right, well, we're just going to go throw everything in here and we'll see how it does. Which is one of the reasons why one of the first things I did was I went out and I got a bunch of organic matter and brought it in the form of wood mulch, and just carpeted everywhere, 6 inches of wood mulch. And it's not because I'm planning on growing in wood mulch. It's just I needed to get a jump start on that organic material, so that we can have a little bit going on while the other trees and other systems get up to the point where they can be used to add back into the system. Um, and yeah, we never make, I don't know. Hopefully we get there completely. But yeah, if we don't start, it's never going to happen. If you don't start something, there ain't going to be none. Let's see here. Fastest way to get to no input is rabbit manure. Yeah. Rabbit manure is great stuff. You can put it directly on the garden and you're good to go. As long as you can keep the rabbits from destroying everything in the process. But I have seen some examples of people making rabbit tractors, kind of like chicken tractors. Okay, so you can place nutrient inputs uphill, so gravity will distribute them. Example, location of chicken house, sheep rotation, waste collection. Yep, yes. We're going to get to that later on tonight. Can you imagine a community of 1,000 people living in proximity, living in large permaculture systems? I know I can. I know I can. I, I think eventually that's what we're going to have to do. Hi, John. Hey, there is another one of Carol Conrad's grandsons. That's John Conrad. He's the one I was referring to earlier, who keeps on going out and spraying for his pigweed and his Canadian thistle. All right. And yeah, inputs are thrown into the rubbish. People will bag up their leaves come fall and put them out on the curb for someone to come and pick up and carry away. And that's your inputs. Your trees were mining the nutrients from the subsoil, bringing them up. The leaves fell, and what's supposed to happen now is those are supposed to decompose on the surface of the soil and put those nutrients on the surface of the soil where everything else can get to it. But you just raked it all up. Same way you raked up the grass, rake it all up, put it in a bag, put it on the curb, and now what do you have to do? Well, now you got to go fertilize your yard because the fertility that you did have that was coming from the perennial systems that you did have, you probably didn't have enough to begin with. You just took and disposed of. Hi, Boone. I've tried raising rabbits before. I suppose we could try it again, but I hate dealing with rabbits. I hate dealing with livestock. Livestock is my bugbear. I've got one chicken right now. Speaking of, what was the next thing after observation? Choose your battles. That's some good advice. It's not only from a self-defense standpoint, but for designing a dynamic system as well. So my daughter learned to observe, to be aware of developing situations, to accurately assess her abilities and make choices. This requires some flexibility to be able to decide when, where, or even if one's going to do battle. It might not be what you want to do, but exercising the ability to choose ensures that one is only fighting battles that one can win. So how does this advice factor into permaculture design? We'll go back to your very first observations. If one's wanting to grow something like avocados, for example, and the climate is relatively arid with poor water infiltration, that means the water isn't getting into the soil very much before it can flow off because you've got that hard-packed soil. Things aren't going to work out very well, or at least at first. But with proper management, even a seemingly unsuitable site can be guided to the point where it might be possible to grow a water-hungry crop like avocados. Now, what would it take to grow these hypothetical avocados in what's essentially a desert climate? Well, you could begin with your water management strategies. Catchment and swales, upslope to maximize your water concentration where you want those trees to grow. Build soil organic matter by planting in succession. Establish windbreaks and shade to further protect that soil as it builds. And eventually, one can plant a few avocados. Most likely not enough to be a major export from the property, but it's certainly possible to bring the site to the point where you might be able to grow some for your personal use. Now, here's another example. I want to grow Cornus canadensis, which is a creeping dogwood, also called bunchberry. They don't really taste like much of anything. They kind of have a sweet flavor, but it's a small, low growing ground cover, about 4 inches high, very woody, with bunches of little tiny red berries. They're sweet, but they don't really have any flavor other than a little mild sweetness. But they're very high in pectin, so you can grow bunch berries and use those as a base for making jams and jellies, which is what I eventually want to do with them. But they're also one of those little, sort of bridge species that you can plant inside of the ecosystem to keep the mycorrhiza fungi flowing and keep a larger network interconnected. Uh, Problem is they're a zone 6 perennial and I'm in zone 7A. So they may be able to handle the winters okay, but the summers are going to be very hard for them unless I plan the site and work my design to allow maybe a little bit of a microclimate that can protect plants like that from heat. So good shade from canopy and understory trees. So smaller perennials contributing to that overall umbra. An aquatic component like a little frog pond or something of that nature within the immediate vicinity under the shade, so that here under this canopy area, under the canopy, understory, more perennials, pond, we might be able to generate a cool enough environment in here that during the hottest part of the summer, it's not that hot, and something that's just one zone removed might be able to be able to handle it. I think we can pull that off. Got a picture here. It looks like this guy's holding up this great big boulder. Oh wow. He's exerting a lot of effort to do that. Well, no, it's he's just leaning against it, but you get the idea. Let me back up and have a look here. You love it when they bag it up for you. Hey, yeah. It's great whenever somebody prepackages your organic matter for you, so you don't have to work that hard to go get it. uh, let's see here. Conrad Farms had picked up 12 55-gallon bags of leaves. Yeah, it's a shame that people are throwing it away, but it's better that you pick it up and you use it on your site so it can do something productive instead of it going to a landfill. Mm. What? You guys are having a pajama party? Really? You didn't tell me anything about a pajama party. Oh yeah. Conrad Farms says that ground covers are good solutions to combat grass. I'd rather remove strawberries if needed than crabgrass. Oh yeah, any day out of the week. Of course, I think I mentioned this in one video a while back. Is, you know, why would a thoughtful and caring creator put this plant on planet Earth that we have to contend with? But everything serves a purpose. Everything in nature is designed with a purpose, and this is the thing. That crabgrass, running grasses, Bermuda grass, like running out there, grabbing hold of the soil and going, okay, I've got this. I'm going to hold on to this. I've got it here. I've got it here. And hold this soil. And when dust blows in, I'm going to catch it right here. And then we have dust gathering here. We got the water. I'm holding onto moisture. I'm covering up the ground, and I'm going to make sure that we build soil here. Well, that's what it's trying to do. So you're better off planting something like a strawberry that you get a yield from. You're going to have something covering the ground anyway. I have not grown sea buckthorn, sassafras red, but I know there are a lot of people out there that do. Yeah, Archimedes, give me a lever long enough and a place to put the fulcrum, and I can move the world. And that's one thing that you want to be thinking about is how can you leverage what you have to work with? What resources do you have? How can you leverage that? And leverage is not always, an actual literal lever, but imagine how you can take those resources and perhaps some of the problems you have and turn them into solutions or products that you can produce. Sometimes you get yields in the strangest of ways, or things will wind up happening that you hadn't anticipated. For example, here I'm trying to start up this nursery, and the amount of potting soil that we have available is not great. We've got some that I can purchase relatively cheaply, but it's not really great quality. Um, Even the stuff that I mix together out of what I can find is not of great quality. So if I'm going to be growing and being proud of what I'm growing, I really have to make it myself from scratch. And I'm working on establishing the systems that allow me to grow, manufacture lots of high quality organic matter. And as it turns out, there may be a market for that. I might be able to actually take some of this green waste that I'm getting from the green waste site, truck it over here. It's free to pick up. It just costs me the gas to go pick it up and bring it out, and a little bit of sweat equity to unload it into corrals. I'm building the corrals out of cement blocks, so that once they're built up, I can take a shovel and pull it out and mix it up with some sand, which is locally sourced. We have the cement plant, which is, I think, 4 miles away, and I can just go straight over there. They dredge the sand from the river. The sand comes down. It's not a 100% renewable resource, but close enough to it. We're not going to run out of sand anytime soon. Um, I can get some of that sand. I can mix some of the sand in with my organic matter. Clay is here in abundance. There's about maybe 2 miles away from here is a place where they're extracting clay from a hillside, and um, it's a lot of clay. It's this Oklahoma red dirt, red phosphorus clay, high in phosphorus, and really good for growing your plants in. I would like to get some of that black gumbo clay that they have down there in southern Texas. I would really love to get some of that, but at the moment, I don't know. I don't think I want to pay to have it loaded up in a truck and shipped up here. It might be worth, or it might cost more than it's worth. Um, but mixing in the clay and the sand together with the organic matter, we can come up with the basis for a pretty good soil. And I'm going to add some more things to it. But I'll get into that later. I'll get into that later. Carl got his tree. All right. Get that thing planted out where you want it fairly quickly. You want it in the ground before it comes out of dormancy. Um, who was it? Who was it that that I was chatting with that had, I think it was Little Frenchie in Big Texas was talking about, and that's Nunya back 20 tech, or Nunya Texas back 20, 20 back Texas. Anyway, Nunya Farms and Little Frenchie are a husband and wife couple. But she was talking about, yes, she did have the long shovel for extracting plants, but she still would wind up losing them whenever she transplanted. And she said they would die off within a couple of weeks. And I need to get back to her and talk to her about this, because I know exactly what she's doing. She's going and she's digging them up while they're still trying to grow, and she's not getting them out during the dormant cycle. When you're transplanting trees, deciduous trees particularly, get them out during the dormant cycle, plant them during the dormant cycle. They've already gone to sleep for the year, and that disturbance won't cause them as much stress as it would if they were still trying to grow and develop whenever you pull them up out of the ground. Would love to have a frog pond. We don't have enough to room. I don't know. I need to figure out a way I can get a frog pond in. We don't have a whole lot of room either, but I'm sure we can design around a frog pond if the frog pond is going to be an essential element of the design. Let's see. Yeah, if you're buying transplants, it's usually better to remove any flowers and let the plant put energy into growing rather than the fruit. Yeah, absolutely. It's a sand deficit in the world, using it for all the damn cement. uh, yes, it is true. Earthworm, Conrad Farms says it's true that earthworms need a certain amount of grit or sand. Yes, absolutely. They need a certain amount of grit. They'll get it themselves. And it um, doesn't have to be really coarse either. Very fine sand, they'll be able to get it. In almost any soil sample that you can come up with, there's going to be enough fine grit in there for the earthworms. But if you're growing red wigglers in a vermicompost and you haven't given them something, you should give them some sort of grit that they can use. that goes into their gizzard. They have a gizzard. They grow bacteria in their gizzard. They have itsy bitsy teensy weensy little mouth parts and get around the very tiniest little particles that go in there, and then the grit helps grind them up. The bacteria help break them down, and they form their castings. Whenever they leave those castings behind, they're leaving behind little inoculants of beneficial soil microbes, bacteria, and some of the protozoa that are also beneficial for accumulating nitrogen. Man, super soil you bought last year. This is Simply Jan says the super soil we bought last year was garbage. Had a lot of plastic particles and trash, and it was very disappointing. See, yeah, exactly. There is definitely a potential market out there. Definitely a potential market out there for a high quality potting soil well, high quality soil of any sort that could be bagged up and shipped out. So I'm pretty sure that that might be an extra income stream if I don't use it all myself. I will get into it. Not in the next week or two. There's a lot of things I still have to do, but I'm working on putting together the footage, the video for it, and then there are a bunch of other components that are gonna get incorporated in over the course of the summer. We'll cover most of it. The reason you don't, Marius Tulsa Bucks, the reason you don't recall sand in the worm boxes is because you did not see me put it in there. I did add some sand. I also added a lot of clay. In this case, it was bentonite clay that I put in there. That was the old raised beds. That was like, okay, so 2 years ago, I built some raised beds and I put peat moss in. I will never use peat moss again. I will never use peat moss again. This is the motto. I'll never use peat moss again. Peat moss is a reservoir for fungus gnat eggs. If you have problems with fungus gnats eating the roots of your plants, chances are you've got peat moss in your potting mix somewhere. So if you can find organic potting mix without peat moss in it, get it. If you do that, you won't have to worry about the fungus gnats ever again. All right, going back here. All right, so we got the picture of the guy trying to hold up the boulder, trying to hold up the mountain all by himself. I wanted to find a picture of a guy rolling a boulder up the hill to indicate that senseless, repetitive work, that treadmill, Sisyphus, the trials of Sisyphus, rolling the boulder up the hill only to have it roll back down again. And of course, we're coming over to the principle of conservation of energy. For years now, I've been saying don't spend the effort to do one thing if you can do two or more things at the same time. This is an example of the fifth principle of conservation of energy. In permaculture terms, this equates to stacking functions. What's a good example of this? Well, I personally like the idea of planting Dutch white clover in all walkways. As a ground cover layer, it helps prevent soil loss to erosion. It maintains and extends mycorrhizal associations with plants on either side of the walkway. It looks attractive and feels nice on the feet, especially if you're walking barefoot. Forms associations with beneficial microbiome to form nitrogen nodules on its roots that drop off as the above ground foliage is disturbed by walking on it, for example, thus fertilizing the adjacent plants. Its flowers, in addition to being edible themselves, are also attractive to pollinators. Errant rabbits would prefer to eat it rather than most of your vegetables. It can be cut back to provide an additional boost of nitrogen for composting. Uses of hot raised for most animals, grows reasonably well in the shade, so it outcompetes most grasses there. And as a perennial, I only have to establish it once. That's a whole bunch of functions can be conducted by one little element that you can plug in. A nice green clover walkway growing in the shade. Every time you walk around, you're fertilizing. Just walking through your garden, you're fertilizing. Conrad Homestead says, do you know of any tricks to seal a pond after it's just been built? I've heard of someone using pigs, but I can't remember where I found the information. I think it was in the book. Yes, you can use pigs. I don't recall where I heard that, but I have seen it in action before. Who is it that I saw that most recently did that? I'm thinking Sawyer Ridge. If you find Sawyer Ridge, they're up there and around Pryor, I think. This is actually, if you go up to the meetup on May 22nd in Pryor, you'll probably encounter Alex and Jacob, and they put pigs in their ponds to help seal it. So, okay, it was a stage, John. It just goes on and on and on and on. Oh, incidentally, I'm not done with that yet. It felt like a good place for a break to catch my breath. Yeah, running hogs. Of course, you can always um, go find a place where there's plenty of clay, and use clay as a liner for your ponds. If you don't have clay, you'd have to get it from somewhere else, but you should have clay somewhere, hopefully. Of course, yes, peat moss is not very sustainable, hickory cross says, because it is mined from organic deposits that take thousands of years to accumulate. You can grow peat moss, and if you were to be farming peat moss, you would be taking water and sunlight and atmospheric carbon, combining them together, and you can grow it on water and sunlight and atmospheric carbon. That's it. That, that's peat moss. Enjoy. You can grow it in an aquarium with nothing else, no other inputs, just the water and the sunlight and the carbon out of the atmosphere. But it does grow slow. So the rate that people are mining it, then there's also the problem of fungus gnats. Sheepfoot roller design comes. Yeah, roller crypts can be used for cover crops, of course, for your walkways. Clover, using perennial clover instead of annual clover as a cover crop. Think about this concept. You only have to plant it once. Well, you might need to reseed occasionally. You might every now and then. But once you've got this established across your field, you've got a place where you want to plant an annual crop. Okay, that's fine. Uh, I can't remember which university it was. Wasn't Oregon. Wasn't Oregon. It might have been. It might have been Michigan University. I'll have to go check and look in on that. There was a university that was conducting trials for planting clover, perennial clover, as a cover crop for cornfields. I'm not trying to encourage people to grow a lot of corn, but I understand as long as there's a demand for it, there's going to be somebody out there trying to meet that demand. So, good ideas. If you're going to be growing large amounts of corn or things of that nature, might consider using a perennial cover crop of clover on your field. And then what they were doing at the university was spraying herbicide to top kill it. Why? I don't know why. You can get flamers that can be towed behind your tractor and flame it to top kill it. You could do that. You could roll out strips of silage tarp to smother it for about 2 or 3 weeks, pull the silage tarp up, and then finish it off with a flamer. Now you've got nice bare dirt that you can seed into where you're going to put the corn, and you've got all the nitrogen that was left whenever you killed off the clover that was there. Whenever you're done growing the corn, even while the corn's growing, the clover is going to grow in on the ground layer to cover up the soil, so you don't lose a whole lot of soil to erosion. Yes, you're probably still going to want to put hedgerows on either side of that planting, enough to serve as a windbreak. Of course, stop accidental cross contamination with other varieties if you got other varieties growing over there, and make it big enough that you can make 1 or 2 passes with your corn head. That's enough space, and you get like one of those 16, 18 row corn heads on there. If you're still using that big equipment, you can, and you can work that into a much more sustainable system of agriculture than what people have been doing. What people have been doing is just insanity. Um, yeah, clover is a cover crop. Replace the spraying with occultation. That's where you cover it with that silage tarp or a sheet of plastic or something of that nature to do your top kill. You don't have to spray it. You don't have to till it. Yeah, cover crops and then kill it with herbicides. Why? What are you thinking? Just what are you thinking there? Uh, there's John at Will It Grow. What's up, Dwarf Kangaroo? He's talking to Darren. Yeah, and then yeah, the big agriculture. Darren says they kill off the crop with spray to harvest. They do that here in the U.S. too. It's just crazy. Sarsaparilla. So please tell me what a hedgerow is. It's been so long since I've seen them in the cornfield parking lots of Illinois. Yeah, this is kind of interesting. Over there in Europe, for hundreds of years, thousands of years, farmers had hedgerows. This is very normal, ordinary practice to have a hedgerow. This is where you take a band of perennials and you plant a hedge, a row of these perennials. And people would use this as basically the fence or the boundary line between properties, or the boundary line between I'm going to plant this here and I'm going to plant that there and I'm going to plant this here. On the one hand, it's a good way of helping neighbors stay good neighbors. On the other hand, it's a habitat for your predatory insects, a habitat for your pollinators, a habitat for your beneficial animals, your birds. Uh, you can come along to these perennial systems and get a yield from those as well. So not only are they helping to preserve your soil by having roots in the ground, not only are they helping to keep mycorrhizal associations going year in and year out, because you're obviously not tilling where the hedgerow is. So the mycorrhizae don't have to start from zero every time, which is what happens whenever you till. Incidentally, you disturb the mycorrhizae; they have to start all over again. Um, you were joking, okay? But yeah, we should be seeing hedgerows everywhere, everywhere, everywhere in farming country, and we just don't see them. It's just miles and miles of open fields. Occasionally, there's a fence, and you can't get the tractor too close to the fence, so some things grow up on the fence line. That's about it. That's not a hedgerow. Yeah, a little bit more space to grow cash crops. Well, I mean, if your hedgerow was designed in mind of being able to provide a yield for you, um, guys, anywhere from zone 4 up north, or if you're on the other side of the planet, 4 down south to zone 9, you can be planting hazelnuts. Hazelnuts make a great hedgerow crop. Do hazelnut, some kind of nitrogen fixer. I've got a few ideas there. You could use uh, your uh, Carcer canadensis, which is the eastern redbud. You could use Siberian push for your zone 7 through zone 2. Down south, you would use the pigeon bee. You could use Elaeagnus multiflora. I would not use autumn olive or silverthorn because those get invasive. I mean, they'll work, but the gummy plant's better. It won't take over. Um, Catalpa, which is more of a biomass producer. You can cut it down and use that to make your fertilizer with. Any number of nitrogen fixing trees can be fit into the hedgerow. Then, of course, you have other things you can put in the hedgerow too: blackberries, blueberries, raspberries. Um, I mentioned currants. Currants. What else can we put in there? Small fruit trees. Occasionally a pecan tree here and there, all through the hedgerow. And what do you do with this? Well, now that you've got that established, one other yield that you get from your farm is going along the hedgerow and collecting the nuts. If nothing else, you can eat them yourself and save yourself a grocery bill. Well, the biggest downfalls to overcome to the closed loop system designs are the septic tanks. Hmm. Mm-hmm. You have to manage a proper hedgerow. Yes, you do. Yes. I lost track of what was going on here. What did they know after the Dust Bowl? Well, yeah, Sassafras Red. They should have known. It was blatantly obvious what the problem was. And here around Tulsa, we have this culture that's developed where we're obsessed with trees. There are local businesses that compete with each other for the ability to plug in trees everywhere. There's an open berm somewhere along the side of the road. They go in, they buy the trees, they plant them, just and they put up a little sign up with trees, which is funny because the signs are made of wood. But if you're growing the wood, you have wood to harvest and you have wood to build things out of. So it's not that bad. Osage orange. There you go. Bodark. Redbud grows so slow. Hmm. It does and it doesn't. Whenever it gets a growth spurt, it grows fast. But yeah, it can take a while to a good size. Um, let's see here. Redbud is a nitrogen fixer, Conrad. Yes. Conrad Farms. Yes, red bud is a nitrogen fixer. It is a member of the Fabaceae family. The little flowers that appear in springtime are also edible. A little bit on the sweet side. You could use them. You could ferment them. Make a vinegar out of them. If you don't want to eat them fresh, they're lovely in a salad. The seed pods themselves, presumably the seeds are edible, but I haven't tried it yet. I understand you kind of have to roast them to make them palatable. But let me see. Acacia, yeah. All of your acacias are nitrogen fixers as well. Of course, around here we have black locust, you have honey locust. Those are all members of the acacia family. Lots of thorns. I don't like them. If I could plant something else that does the same job, I'd rather plant something else. Uh, Further southwest, you've got mesquite, which is also a pioneer. Unfortunately, mesquite takes over everything. I think the reason why people are using mesquite as a smoking wood is because they had to figure out something to do with it. Otherwise, it takes over everything, and you get nothing to show for it. So, what are we going to do? We're going to cut back the mesquite. Well, how are we going to get rid of all this mesquite? Let's sell it for smoking wood. Caligas told the wheat farmers the land needed the grass. Yeah, people were warned ahead of time before the Dust Bowl happened. People were warned ahead of time. This is not the normal situation. Droughts are going to come. Droughts are going to come, and whenever the droughts come, if you've tilled everything up, we're going to lose the soil. So they already had the warning, and then we got to see the near desertification of large swaths of Kansas and Oklahoma. All right. The red bud pods, yes, they turn bitter once the flowers are gone. The pods turn bitter, and you can't eat them unless you go ahead and grow them until you've got the full size seeds. Then you roast the seeds. Otherwise, I wouldn't eat them. Mesquite's a food crop, yeah. Also called screw bean. The natives made a habit of eating mesquite. The beans from the mesquite are edible. Black locust is a beautiful lumber, sassafras red says. An excellent choice for anything you're going to use for an outdoor application. Post wood, outdoor furniture, stuff like that. Great stuff. It doesn't rot very easily. Mesquite made good filtered shade. Where was it? Good filtered shade cover for citrus in Arizona. As a matter of fact, Paul, I was thinking actually of mesquites and Arizona earlier when I was talking about that growing avocado in an arid environment. There are swales out there that the WPA put together 40 years ago, and they just went out there and said, make work project, keep the guys employed doing something. They hired them to go out in the desert, and they moved earth around, and they made swales. And there was one of them that I saw that was horseshoe shaped, like a big horseshoe. So the water flowing down off the watershed comes down, is collected into this horseshoe, and actually collects. And you have standing water here in the desert for at least a short amount of time, but the swale held it in place so the water would actually infiltrate. Once the water was able to actually infiltrate and get down into the soil, plants actually had a chance to grow and prosper. So the plants started coming in, and you'd be surprised of all the plant species that show up and are now growing here. And later on, you can have those mesquites growing up. They're providing nitrogen. Of course, whenever they lose their leaves, that nitrogen goes back into the soil, helps everything else grow. And this would be an example where it might be possible to, over time, develop a system out in the desert where you could grow something like an avocado with a little bit of shade provided by some taller trees. All right. Apparently, John's having some issues. I must not have seen whatever you're talking about. The horseshoe shape mimics an oxbow. Yep. Get a room. Yep. It's one of those features that you see in a naturally formed river. All right, let's move on. So on your way up to the water catchment to release a little irrigation water to your crops, you can bring your basket along with you to harvest some fresh vegetables. From the side of your clover-covered walkway, stop for a moment to pull up your chicken tractor just a little bit further down the slope. Turn the valve to release the water. Release the water. It has the fish dung in it to both water and fertilize your crops down slope. Check the passive fish trap that you have set up there. Take the biggest fish or two out of there. They're in there. Turn the rest of them loose in the pond again. Close the valve. Walk down the slope towards the chicken tractor, gathering more fresh veggies as you go. Collect the eggs. Toss some extra fodder in for the birds. Finish your walk back to the house with a day's worth of food and all of that work done. Now that's conservation adventure, that's efficiency, that's stacking functions, that's permaculture. So now, who wants to see a visual demonstration of what swales and key lines look like? Since that was actually the question that Paul had at the very beginning of last week. I was going to do this with Play-Doh, and then I looked at it and I realized the camera's not going to show it really well. So I found a good example of some pictures, and I've got these up on the website here. Well, of course, in the blog post here. And we'll just go ahead and have a look at it. Got a show of hands there from Arkansas Woodcutter. Okay, so what we have here is a fairly dry looking slope. Don't mind me, I'm going to hit the vaporizer for just a second. Have a look at this. Can you guess what time of year this is? It's one of two seasons. One of two seasons. And I don't really know off the top of my head which one it is, but it's probably summer. And the reason I think it's probably summer is because that's a deciduous tree. The deciduous trees lose their leaves in the winter. It's got its leaves on. And everything is dry. Here at this primary valley here, everything is dry. There's no greenery going on anywhere. If this was spring, we would at least see some greenery. So this has got to be in the middle of summer. And what you can tell even from this distance is we got a lot of rock, we got a lot of sand, we got probably a lot of hard pan, a lot of clay. This grass here is all brown, 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 everywhere brown. Let's go over some of the morphology here. Across the top, we have what's called a main ridge. If you were looking at your fist, that here, your knuckles here, right across where you punch at, this is a main ridge. Coming down from the main ridge, it's like coming in between your knuckles here. Look at this. All right. We have this depression here. This is called a primary valley. And here are primary ridges. They're kind of like the slope of your fingers coming out from your knuckles. If you're just looking at your own hand the way it is. Can you imagine how water is going to interact with this landscape when it falls? It's going to fall here. It's going to hit the ridges. It's going to flow down into this valley, then straight on down to what's called the main valley. Here at the bottom, we have main valleys. It'll flow around. It'll be off the property, heading down the road. As a matter of fact, you can see where some of the soil is washed off of that slope onto the road. Grass has tried to grow here, and you've got a road that probably is not in great shape. So what can we do about this if you wanted to actually make this into a more productive system? Not key lime pie. Arkansas Woodcutter says winter. I'm thinking summer. Yeah. All right, so what can we do? We want to capture the water. We want it to actually infiltrate into the soil. I bet the soil does not have good infiltration right now. I'll bet right now when water hits it, it runs straight on down, especially at that angle. Runs straight on down and it's gone. Okay. All right. Like I said, this dry side looks like winter to me, but now that I've analyzed it further, I'm thinking it may be summer. All right. Covered what's going on here. That land could definitely be better utilized. Let's take a look at swales real quick. This is an example of what swales would look like, not physically, but I drew it on here. So swales, you can think of swales as being ditches dug on the contour. So this follows the contour of the land, the slope. These are all at the same elevation. So the water, whenever it comes down, hits this point. It doesn't go left. It doesn't go right. It stays here in this ditch. At that point, it's going to be slowed down. The water will be trapped. Gives it time to infiltrate. So you'll have more hydration of the soil in the area where these swales are. That's what swales are. Now, if the only part of the land you had was this part from right here where these edges are on over, yeah, you'd probably be using swales because this is all all one piece. But if your property included this part over here, where this primary valley is, remember primary valley right there? This is where the water is trying to run to. It's trying to run to this valley. Down from the ridge, into the valley, down into the valley, on down the road. Okay. So here's an example of the swales. It's essentially the ditches on contour. All right. Swales are more effective on land with a much more gentle slope. In this example, although there will be some water infiltration, the primary ridges are going to remain a bit dry. So even this spot here is going to stay dry. You'll get a little bit from right around here, but it's going to stay dry up here along this ridge. You could have swales running across this one too, and this ridge here, although you'll have water infiltration, you'll be able to save some water. The ridges themselves are going to stay dry. That ridge will stay dry. This ridge will stay dry. Of course, the very top is going to stay dry. Now you could come in and put a mound here, basically a dam, damming up part of that valley. You could do that right along here where the swale is, and you'll have a little catchment pond. And that's something you could do. Incidentally, right about here would be about the best place to put a catchment pond if you could work it in. That way you'll have your water coming in from upslope, boom, 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 catching, gathering in the pond, and then you can use that water for irrigation downslope. Because it's a lot easier to let gravity take over, let that water flow down, let the water flow down, let the water flow down. All right. Everybody with me so far? All right, I'll talk to you later, John. Okay. All right, so key points. This is the cool part here. I'll show you key points. All right, so the point where the land goes from being convex, like this. The point where it goes from being convex and begins to turn concave. That point where it makes the transition from convex to concave, hill to valley. That point right there, where my fingers are meeting, that's a key point. So if you want to know what the key points are, that's how you know where it is. The point where it goes from being convex, it starts turning concave. And that's, of course, the point where you would start drawing your line for making key lines. And let's go ahead and come down here. Let's show you key line irrigation. So we found these points right here where we're going from convex to concave. And just like a swale, you're cutting a ditch, essentially, for water to run in. But unlike a swale, it's not on contour. See, these lines do run downhill. But as they run downhill towards that ridge. So the ridge is a high point, right? Yes, it is. If you were going on contour, the ridge would be a high point here. But it's taking the water from further up in that primary valley. Whenever the water falls on the top of the hill, comes down here, hits the key point, goes, oh wow, look, I've got a channel here that I can go into. It goes into the channel. It goes, well, where do I go from here? Well, it doesn't go up and over because you've built a small little berm because you took your plow and you flipped that little bit of soil over downslope. So now there's a ditch, and it starts following that ditch, and it goes down, and it comes out to the ridge down here. Now this part here is still going to wind up being fairly dry because it's not being served by one of these key lines. But this way you allow your water to run downhill from the ridges, or from the valleys to the ridges, just like so. It's not running uphill, it's still running downhill. And that allows you to spread the water out across your landscape. You get water infiltration across a broader area. Now, if you live in a really arid environment, you may not necessarily want to do this, or at least certainly not at first. You're not getting a whole lot of rainfall. You may not want to spread your water out that much. You might want to go ahead and build some of those horseshoe swales and gather and concentrate your water. And remember, choose your battles. You're not going to be able to get everything properly irrigated. So choose the points where you're going to do your work and build out from there. But if you are getting the rainfall and you want to spread it across the landscape, that's the way to do it right there. And of course, this works passively. Every time it rains, water comes in, runs out there. You can still build catchment ponds here. You can build them to the point where the overflow goes out and into the key lines. And of course, I couldn't draw it here because you can't see it. The ridge is here, right? The ridge is blocking the view, but you would also have them coming out. and down through the ridge, down to the ridge, down to the ridge, spraying the water out and irrigating the entire property. Key lines, not key limes. Yeah. Looks like Australia and summer are just missing the flames. Yeah. Okay. So right, you locate the key point where you want the water. Okay. The key point is where the water starts out at, and then the best place in the pond would be, of course, yeah, in the valley. Let's go back to this. In the valleys, right there, like right under where that line is. So you've got a nice buildup, and then whenever the pond gets too full, instead of overflowing into the valley, it overflows and runs the water out to the ridges. And then down here, same thing. Put your pond in here. Whenever it overflows, it chases that water out to the ridges. Down here, whenever it overflows, water out to the ridges. Everything stays hydrated. And of course, what do you put in those ponds? Well, I'm going to put fish in those ponds. I don't know about anybody else, but I love fishing. I think I've already established that. Okay, so this is where personal yeoman's improved on my grandfather's ideas. By beginning the irrigation ditch at the point where the primary ridges began to turn from concave to convex, and running those ditches downhill, the water is encouraged to move out to the crests of the primary ridges, but at a lower elevation. There we go. Now in Grandpa's defense, Conrad Farms was built on a much more gentle grade, so swales and tree belts were all that were needed there. And that's the presentation on permaculture principles. Of course, we covered swales and key lines as well. This is one of the blogs on the website, www.greencountryagroforestry.com. That's our domain. That's our website. We have about every other day I put a new blog in. Run up here. Of course, you're always welcome to come over here and shop. We don't have our plants in yet. We're still getting some seedlings started. They'll be out here in a few weeks. But if you're thirsty, we've got coffee mugs. Yes, they're printed on both sides. We've got, I don't know how many different shades of t-shirt that you can order up and have them shipped to you. Also, I don't have them up available right now because I'm still working out some kinks with the iron-on transfers. Those are a little bit less expensive, but I actually print those out myself and I can pack them up and send them to you. Now, coming up next week, I'm going to be giving a presentation on mycorrhizal associations. If you go up to the top of the website, you're going to find resources. This is where I put it for right now. This may not be where it stays, but for right now, we have a permaculture designer's quick guide to mycorrhizal associations. If you left the stream early, you missed out. You didn't know this was here. This is a nifty little piece of information that I collated and put together and arranged in a form where you can click on the image. You can choose save image and save it, and then at your own leisure, print this off. There are 9 pages altogether. This is a mycorrhizal associations. We show the family of the plant. We show the genus and the mycorrhizal association that they form, whether that is a arbuscular or endomycorrhizal association, whether that's a ectomycorrhizal association, ericaceous mycorrhizal association. Even orchids have their own associations. Each one of these pages is lined up so that there's room on the left-hand side for you to use a hole punch. You throw this into your 3-ring binder, and you have a hard copy of one of the most valuable pieces of information that you could possibly get for designing your own permaculture application. And it is free. It is free. Whenever the book comes out, the book's going to be at least $50 a copy. And this information, all of this information, will be in the book if you don't feel like pointing and clicking, downloading, and printing your own version. You can get it from the book whenever that becomes available. That will be available at the shop as well. The book is still under development. Don't expect it this year. If you want to have these available by next week so you can follow along on your hard copy, I would encourage you to do it. It's free. It's absolutely free, but we'll have a more thorough presentation on mycorrhizal associations next week. Let's take a look at new comments. My swales are drawn backwards. I'm glad you enjoyed the discussion. Terrence standing on his head. Yeah, Mary's correct. I'm constantly doing research. If I know anything, it's only because I have good teachers. I constantly look for information. I constantly try to find new and better sources of information. The mycorrhizal associations. Eventually, what will go into the book is going to be a bit more comprehensive than what's available for free right now. But it is free right now. I got Peter McCoy's book on radical mycology, and it does not have this information in it. So, as much as Peter McCoy knows, even this tiny little bit of information is not in there, and it's very, very powerful. I was talking earlier about blueberries growing in the shade using wintergreen in association. Wintergreen is one of those plants that has mycorrhizal associations both with the ericaceous plants and also with the ectomycorrhizal. So it'll form fungal associations with the hazelnuts and the pecan trees over here, and it'll also form associations with the blueberries over here. And so in that mutual network, should the blueberries go, hey, we're not getting enough sunlight over here, we're not able to photosynthesize, can you help us out? They can get sugars from the mycorrhizal network. Primary photosynthesis is occurring in the upper canopy, transferred through the network to the blueberries underneath. Yeah. And also Plants for a Future does not include, unfortunately for some reason, does not include mycorrhizal associations for the plants. But if you wanted to put everything together in a comprehensive way, you get a hold of these 9 pages for a quick reference, and the information you get from Plants for a Future becomes a lot more useful. Your wintergreen is having a hard time in your blueberries. Yeah, it could. So sassafras red, you have can't have everything. Yeah, yeah. It's also possible that you don't have the right mycorrhizal fungi inoculated in the soil at that point. Now, once again, it's not a guarantee that you're going to wind up with a mutual network just because you have those plants there. All I'm saying is there's a possibility you could get it. Now, you might need to go and acquire the inoculum before you can get the mutual network going. So, have a walk out there in the woods and find a place where there are blueberries growing in the shade, and chances are there is something that is providing that network and connecting to those blueberries to let them do that. That's why you plant it with the blueberries. Yeah, that's the idea. So if the necessary mycorrhiza is not there, oh, incidentally, hold still. This is right behind me. It's just right behind me. You can't find it for sale in the U.S. And given the way things are right now, I don't know if you're able to import it at the moment. You might be able to, but where are you? A little better. There it is. All right, there is an inoculum that you can get for ericoid mycorrhizae. There we go. I had to get this from England. Ta-da! So it does exist. It does exist. Yeah, new barren ground won't have it. So if you're planting into a space where these species did not exist to begin with, it's not going to be there already. So unless they're already with the species that you're planting, it won't be there either. It's kind of like it's an island. If you didn't bring it with you, you don't have it. So find some place to get inoculum. If not from some place that's actually producing it, you can always go out into the wild and gather wild fungi, soil, harvest soil from the forest. There you go. Mary says there's not many what? Anyway, so that's it for today's show. We're coming up on 2 hours. Wow, I went long. that blog post is what is what? Oh, The mycorrhizal inoculant. Do they specify which varieties? They don't specify on the package. Nope. They don't specify specifically which species. You know, at the moment, we don't really know the specific species of all the mycorrhizal fungi out there. There's so many. Make my head big again. Yeah, there's so many. We don't even know a handful of them. And of the handful that we do know, we haven't studied them enough to know everything that they're capable of doing, which plants specifically they interact with, or even what exactly they do. That in the bag is mycorrhizal fungi inoculum for ericaceous plants. Mary, that's what's in the bag. That's what's in the bag. I got this a while back whenever I said, you know what? I want to grow blueberries. Make sure I got the mycorrhizal inoculant because blueberries have never grown here, right? So I had to make sure that they had something to get them started because chances are the nursery I'm getting these from isn't using a good mycorrhizal inoculant. I would bet dollars to donuts they're not. All right, so next week, mycorrhizal associations, we'll be getting into that a lot, like a lot. And well, thank you all for coming out tonight and watching. Amy, which ones did you order? You have to make your sentences a little bit more complete and your thoughts more concise because I don't know what you're talking about. You can just call me after I get done here. Thank you very much, good people. As always, if you found the video informative or entertaining, you know what to do. I'll catch you next time.